What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. We have a new story, and I think we'll introduce you right now. But Robert, I mean, going from the Queen Isabella stuff to what we're going to talk about.
I'm both. I'm excited and a little scared, to be honest with you, a little nervous. This is going to be an interesting journey.
Yeah.
Because I'm finding out things that I know you all are going to freak out about when you hear.
So, Juan, please introduce yourself and let everybody know. Give them a little bit of context about what we're going to talk about.
My name's Juan Carmona. I'm a social studies teacher down in high school, also a dual enrollment professor for South Texas College. I teach U.S. history and Mexican American history. I'm also the author of the Alton Bus Crash. And that is something that, I've had a connection with since when it happened. And even before then, I had connections with buses, a bus accident that really just stuck in my head. So next time I heard a bus accident, it's always, even to this day when I hear about it, that one image of that accident I witnessed when I was a child will always pop in my head.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story, and I think coming from the Queen Isabella Causeway, since it was such a tremendous story, and you told it so well, Robert, we wanted to follow up with something that is just as big and as grand and has a Rio Grande Valley impact. I think that's super important. You're really for the Valley, like you want to preserve the Valley history.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm really into, and it's when you say like the impact on the Valley, it had a nationwide impact. Any bus your child rides today is redesigned because of that accident.
That's crazy.
And it's things like that we're going to get into and look at, and basically the same thing that we did for the Causeway collapse was we took a part of our South Texas history that has basically become obscured, and it's kind of a faint memory in the back of our minds, and we're going to bring those to light, and we're going to share everything, the details about how the accident happened, and we're going to go into real depth as to what, again, 20 some odd years of history and ripple effects have produced for individuals, new laws, things on how buses work and safety mechanisms. So we're gonna visit all those things with Juan's help.
Okay. And as always, the comment section really helps us out. If you all comment with people that you know that might have been in this or were affected by it, reach out to us, because that's literally how the Queen Isabella Causeway stuff was so impacted. It was literally through the comments.
Yeah, it was fueled by you all. Josh and I had no idea that we were going to turn this into a documentary. It literally, that idea and that motivation was birthed through all of the YouTube comments and you all saying, hey, this needs to be a movie. You guys need to write a book. You guys need to do this. And so basically you guys produced it. Positivity and enthusiasm is something that artists and people like Juan and Josh and myself need. Because we have the ideas, and I think some of us realize that we have the abilities, but we don't have the confidence. So the definitely comment and suggest and let us know what path we need to take this story on, because as of right now, it's just going to be a podcast. That's what we're looking at, and hopefully, if there is enough detail and interest from you guys, we can take that and turn that into motivation and give it some visual visual aids in the form of a documentary like we did with the collapse.
Absolutely. And you had actually a really good story about the Alton Bus Crash, but we'll get into that in a bit. So Juan, take us on this journey, man.
September 21st, 1989, Mission School Bus number 6 was picking up the last group of students in Alton. Back then, Alton children attended Mission Consolidated Independent School District, and so they were on their way to Mission, and when they had picked up the last of them, and school buses usually have 2 routes. The first route is young kids, and then the second route is the middle school and high school kids. So these are the older kids. The little ones had already been picked up, so that was the first route. And then the second one, was with the middle school and high school kids, and those were the kids that were in that bus that day.
What did the ages range from?
18 to, I want to say 12 or 13.
Wow.
And they were, and there was 53 people aboard that bus when it was finally
53.
when the last kids get in. At the same time, Ruben Peña is just working for Valley Coca-Cola, has stopped at a Circle K and delivered his first load, which is really important because he'd only unloaded one load there, so his truck was
heavy.
pretty heavy, pretty full at that time. So as he's going north on Bryan, and the bus was coming, let's see, east to west. He's moving north, and his loader, because every truck has a loader, the person who helps unload the thing. So you have the loader and the driver. And his loader notices he's not slowing down. And he points out, hey, there's a stop sign ahead. And according to Ruben, and all this becomes in contestation, is that he immediately put the brakes, but that they didn't work. So then he shifts to his truck brake. And even the kids on the bus witnessed that they said they saw a truck coming really fast. And then most kids aren't paying attention. If you just got a picture of like junior high school students are chatting, they're moving around. A lot of them are standing
span
up,
is very
and they're
short.
they're all over the place. But some kids did see it approaching.
And aside
fast.
from that, those buses are like their homes. I mean, they're traveling them. They trust them. They're not. Their hands are in the hands of the driver. So
the
they're
bus
not
driver.
gazing out the windows. They're doing their thing. Wow.
And some kids yelled, and the bus driver tried to turn away to the right.
Which pushed him into the...
Well, you got him kind of set up for what was sadly about to happen. Now, little background is Alton, Texas is, especially in the early 20th century, was famous for its caliche. In history, you call that era the Gilded Age, and they're building all the skyscrapers. Guess where all that concrete and stuff was coming from? A lot of it was from Alton, Texas. So Alton is riddled with pits all over. And at that time, there was no laws. That's other things that have changed as far as like the regulation of open pits. Now you have to have fences, you have to have barriers. All that changes because of this accident. That's why I said it's not just like a local impact. It has a national impact.
I grew up working in a caliche pit on Stewart Road, just down the ways. It belonged to my parents. It was called Chrome Caliche Pit back in the day.
Oh, so you know what I'm talking about then.
It was it wound up being a 22-acre pond, because what happens, everybody, is that as these big machines are excavating and mining the caliche, they have to go through several layers of topsoil and different types of dirt, and then they get to this rock, and then they rip it, and they get it all out. Well, as they're going down, eventually these pits meet our natural water table. And once you hit that water table and you breach it, water will begin to fill your pond. So this caliche pit that he's talking about had already reached and breached that first water table. So not only was it a deep pit of rock, but there is water filled in it.
Yeah, if you take the short drive out there, you'll see there's still water out there. It's kind of an awe-inspiring thing is to see that.
When I was there a few years ago, we never quite figured out what it was. Is there were some pipes sticking out of the rock wall, draining water.
Drainage water, yeah. Because these pits, again, having been grown up on one, eventually when they are rendered useless, the cities and the municipalities around there utilize them as detention ponds and retention ponds, so that when there's a crap ton of rain and like Westlaco and Ware Road over here on the expressway that fill up, basically what they wind up doing is they take these deep pits, these caliche pits, and they will run runoff water and run drainage lines to them, because they're so deep and there's such a vast amount of acreage that is useless. You can't build on it. It would take too much to refill them. So we run our water to it so that it alleviates the flooding in some of our streets.
Yeah, so the pit was, pretty full of water, enough water for when the accident happens to cover a bus on its side. That's how deep the water was. Wow. But so going back to what would happen is he turns to the right to try to get away from him. the impact does occur. There's two impacts. First is the front end of the Dr. Pepper truck hits the side of the bus. But then more so, though, and that's the one that really caused the accident, was the trailer, which was full of beverage. Like I said, he'd only
So
left
it jackknifed.
it.
Wow.
So what happened? Again, growing up on a caliche pit, we always had 18-wheelers in and out of these pits, and we'd load them up with caliche and they'd be on their way. When a truck is pulling a trailer and the load of the trailer is heavier than the actual truck pulling it, when this truck slams on its brakes, the trailer will continue to push because it outweighs the truck. Well, it'll get to the point to where it pushes it enough to where the trailer will begin to swing around and come around the front. And all you valley truck drivers know what I'm talking about. This is when your truck jackknifes. So what you're saying is that, you see, I didn't know this.
Yeah,
man.
and it swatted the back of the bus. And there was a 2 to 4 foot embankment, and it kind of acted like a ramp. So when it hit, it went over that and landed nose first. And then for a few seconds, and then it fell on its side.
No seat belts.
No, there's still no seatbelts on buses to this day. It's one thing that boggles my mind. We're all about seatbelts, except where we're going to put 50 kids in. But
So then when that bus hit, it went straight down. All those kids had to have.
The descriptions I read is, the person who took the brunt of it, to be honest, is the bus driver, because he hits the ground and this windshield comes into his face. And then with the way it lands, is it pretty much traps most of the kids, is because it lands on its nose, and then that damages the door on the side, the main door. Then when it falls on its side, and that emergency exit now has to be pushed up into the
waterway.
And some kids were able to push it up, but the force and the gravity of the water pushed it closed.
Wow.
So that left the only exit in those buses is the windows. And those windows, I was a kid at that time, and I still remember how hard they were to open, because they had these metal latches you had to push in real hard. And there were 3 settings, so you had to go down one, down another, and it was super difficult to open them. And
even while the bus is in perfect condition,
after
it just
didn't
been
really
impacted. An accordion, you don't even know what the conditions of those windows were.
Yeah, and the water is just so murky.
Yeah, it's dirty water.
You can barely see where you're going. And so there were some windows open, but a lot of them kids struggled to open because, tragically, it was a cool day in September 21st. That doesn't really happen in the Valley very often. Normally, all those windows would be open because it's usually warm, but it was a cool day, so some of those windows were closed. And that was really the only way kids could get out. Now, you also have to picture the fact that, yes, they fall forward, and then someone, are falling, but we don't really see a lot of really major injuries. Sadly, the kids that passed away drowned because they couldn't get out.
Wow.
And so you can imagine they landed, and it wasn't that bad of an impact. Some of the kids say it wasn't that bad because, it got slowed down by the water. But then, and then it slowly started to fill up and fill up and fill up. And as these kids are trying to get out, the only way out is through the windows. Those that get out try to pull other kids. And, sometimes they're just coming back with handfuls of hair. The stories about them getting out are just so tragic and sad, and it's like when I'm doing interviews, it's like I know I'm not going to go and do a happy thing. You're taking tissue with you, because it's just the stories I heard of kids being trying to almost get out, but they're being pulled down by other kids scrambling to get out. And those stories are rough to hear, but the ones that, like I said, who ended up passing, 19 died that day in that scene, and 3 more in the hospital. But they all died from, drowning, from getting water in their lungs.
That is a tremendous event that happened. It's crazy. Robert, when we were chatting the other day, you were kind of telling me about how life was back then. Can you kind of repeat that?
Yeah, because you see, back then, at least it was for me in my neck of the woods, we had horses and we would literally ride. I grew up on the 7 Mile Line and La Homa Road. Pretty much born and raised there. And each of my siblings and I, my parents, we all had horses. And back then, if we wanted to go to the store, to the little Lucky 7 on 5 Mile Line or something, we'd saddle up and we'd ride out there. So it wasn't very uncommon to see horses out, people riding, and a lot of times would encounter car accidents and not bus accidents, I'm sorry, but car accidents and just traffic accidents. And the first thing that somebody riding on a horse does when you see an accident on the side of the road is you ride out there to try to render some kind of aid. I heard, and maybe you've heard about this, about a gentleman who was on a horse.
I was gonna. The minute you said it, Roque Sosa. To me, it was one of the craziest stories I heard, and I
story I was telling you.
I just, there's a whole bunch of things that make it special, but I just think how quickly this man thought. Like, it's not just what he did, but the fact that he thought so quickly. What ends up happening, one of the main people I interview is Alex de Leon. And Alex de Leon gets out of the bus, helps some people out. Then he hears, just from, I call it a cliff.
It's a cliff. That's a 22 foot drop.
And, Alex, someone calling him his name, and nada, Alex, nada. So he's like, swim to the edge. So he sees something thrown down, which he thinks is a rope, and he swims to the edge, and he grabs it. It's actually 2 water hoses tied together. And he starts to pull Alex up, and Alex is freaking out because he's moving real fast. Like, this dude is super strong. Till he gets to the top, and he realizes that Roque had used his horse to pull him out. And the reason Roque knows him, and most of the kids knew him, is because either he had a little ranch, and he would break horses, and he would let the kids ride the horses. That's how they all knew each other.
It was real common for us back then. On the weekends, we'd all get together, and horses and their riders would come over to my dad's house, or we'd congregate at a different ranch. So, lo que es Alton, 107, 7 mile line, 5 mile line, ahí eran puros ranchitos, and all the way up to Conway and all the way up past, Western Road and stuff. So on the weekends, pues se juntaba toda la gente, and we'd be out there roping, riding, jumping, barreling.
It's just a normal thing.
It was just a normal thing for us. So when I heard this story, it made so much sense. And I've told people about this horseback rider, and it seems to baffle them. But what they don't understand is the community we're talking about, that's the way our life was back then.
Wow.
I mean, 20 some odd years now, it seems odd. But yeah, no, he was a real hero.
Yeah, and to me, just like the thought, because he was there shortly after the accident, that he must have stopped, paused, unscrewed some, probably like, I don't have any rope, let me get, or long enough rope, I got 2 hoses together and rode out, just the quick response and the quick thought of that man is just amazing.
So for you all who haven't visited or are maybe listening to this podcast and are not from the Valley or haven't ever seen, let me just kind of paint a really simple picture for you. So if you can close your eyes and picture yourself at a 4-way stop. Actually, no, a 2-way stop. You got west and eastbound traffic, and you got north and southbound traffic. Well, the north and the southbound are the ones that have stops. On one of these corners, actually it's the northwest corner, after the stop, it's just a drop. There's no...
Yeah, it's literally right there.
Right there, right off the road. If I'm talking maybe just a few feet. So even him, and there was no fence back then or anything, so even him riding up close next to it, he could see down. I mean, there's no trees obstructing the view. There was literally nothing to protect any vehicle. It's just an open pit on the side of what is now today a very, very major road.
Yeah. And I just think about, like, there was, like, I think 2 weeks before that, there was an accident as well. A car went in there. So, and they were already discussing, maybe we should do something about it, but it became that game of, it's not the city, it's a county. Oh, no, it's not the county, it's the state. Oh, no, that's the Railroad Commission. And, that just... and finally, after the accident, they passed a law to ensure that all pits are closed. But if you look, it's always amazing when I look at some of the footage or the pictures, it's just like how huge it was and how open it was.
Yeah, well, you got to understand that while they're mining the caliche, the truck, the 18-wheelers literally have to drive all the way in there. You're talking acres of just pit, of just a pit. And so yeah, I grew up listening and hearing the story about the rider that he took not only one person, but apparently he helped several children out. And I heard the story that he was lassoing kids up, but apparently now it turns out to be a garden hose.
Yeah, it was a garden hose.
That's even crazy.
That's to me, like, you think that maybe it would make sense. Yeah, he was riding his horse, he had his rope with him, but the fact that, like, just quickly.
Well, the thing is that it has, again, being around, ranch and farm animals and things of that nature, to lift somebody up dead weight, to pull them up with a lasso. Those lassos are so thin and sharp almost. I can see how
It would have injured him
it
more.
would have injured them, just as much as whatever they had
dragging them
sustained.
that many feet.
Dragging them that many feet up in the air. So a water hose that has some sort of elasticity, elasticity or whatever that is, it's stretching it. I can see how that would have made sense to somebody. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's one of the, they're like, there's some truly tragic stories, and then there's just truly heroic stories at the same time. But that's like with any and all tragedy, as you're aware of. Now you'll hear
They go
some
hand in hand.
yeah.
It's just like night and day. Or good and evil and all of that stuff. It's the yin and the yang of every tragic accident. Sometimes the positive stuff is revealed later in life, and sometimes it happens simultaneously as the tragedies happen. Something amazing and wonderful and very, very endearing is also going on at that same moment. So, yeah, those things go hand in hand. You can't get away from one or the other.
I think another way to understand just how deep it was is there's testimony of a kid who missed the bus, and his dad put him on a car to take him, and they heard the crash.
Oh my God!
But they turned around and all they saw was a Dr. Pepper truck because the bus was gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so they just kept going.
It's if you can imagine yourself in a car on the road at a two-way stop. You can literally look out the side and see the pit and its depth. So it was. I can see how
So the bus was completely
out of
It was
range.
gone. Like if you were you'd have to look down.
Yeah, you'd have to get there.
Yeah,
and look down.
if you were just standing on the road, you just see that as the kid saw a Dr.
Yeah.
Pepper truck
Yeah.
on the side, but that was the bus was in the pit. I mean, another person, I think it was Luis Guerrero, was a diver, and he got there shortly after. You talk about heroism. That guy pulled out over 11 people, no gear. Stopping to sometimes to give him first aid, all that, and he was just going till when the next medics showed up, and he literally collapsed in their arms because he was just so exhausted.
Fatigued, yeah.
And the bus driver too. The bus driver, sadly, he's yelling, "No es mi culpa. It's not my fault," and it wasn't. And he's all cut up, but him too are just pulling as many kids as he can out of it. And everyone. It becomes a really chaotic scene, kind of like what you described, because everybody and anybody, and with great intentions, shows up to help. So you end up with Border Patrol, state troopers, local police, county, firefighters from all the nearby cities, and then just other people just stopping to try to help. So it becomes a very chaotic scene. I know that. I don't think anyone had ever thought to do a mass casualty drill like that. And I know later I became a paramedic and we would actually drill mass casualty drills, but I'm not sure if they were doing them at that time. It was everyone, with the best intentions, but a very uncoordinated effort, but everyone just doing the best they can. Because, you hear kids and, you snap out of it. I worked in a hospital for years and, especially in the emergency room and stuff. And, people like, we get all kinds of injuries, all kinds of people, and it just becomes a routine. But when it's a child, everybody, is fazed by it. Like some people, you need a certain detachment to work in healthcare, but when it's a child, it's a whole different level.
Mm-hmm.
How many times, we would see something tragic with a child, and everyone wants to go to the phone to check on their kid or just talk to them.
It's funny because during the incident at the causeway, I was ready to leave. I had and Roland tells me there could be kids in the water, Robert.
Yeah.
And it sparks, it ignites something in you. Like it's the weirdest thing, but I'm glad that you just brought that up because you're 1,000% right. A child is a child, whether it's yours, his or hers, or whatever. As soon as there's a child suffering or in danger or needing of some of your help, that just moves us in a way that very few things do.
From the time that the bus fell in, when was the first person there to start helping people pull out?
I was within minutes because I know when Alex gets out and Roque Sosa pulls them out, there's already a Border Patrol agent there. And when you're looking at is I always to me when I'm picturing the accident, we have to go back in time. no cell phones. A lot of people didn't have a phone, especially in that area. And so it's amazing what word of mouth would do. Plus, they were in their neighborhood, so everyone heard a crash. So, we've had people running there and then, calling people, and, the Border Patrol's there immediately. There was a firefighter that was passing by, and they turn around. So it's within minutes.
What was the firefighter's name? Do you know? Because he was off duty.
Yeah, I want to say it was Luis Guerrero, but I could be wrong. I got to check my notes.
Okay.
I think because he had just passed. And he was off duty.
A buddy of mine, Gil's father, he has pictures of his father in shorts and a white shirt in waist-deep water, who was a firefighter back then, and he was one of the first guys there.
It's not Al Nye by any chance.
God, I'm so embarrassed. I'm ashamed.
Just checking.
His name is Gilbert.
Gilbert. I'd have to look at my notes. I remember Luis Guerrero. Al Nye was another one that I remember the name clearly right now. And so it's within minutes, and it sounds horrible, but 5 minutes is brain death.
Jeez.
5 minutes without oxygen is brain death. So I mean, I'm amazed that many kids got out, and then people they would get out, but they'd had to stand on top of the bus till people came with boats and divers and stuff. It's almost amazing that only 21 kids died. Because of the way you could only get out the windows, and you only really had a few minutes before you would lose consciousness.
And these are 12 to 18-year-olds, so their mental capability was man, wow.
Yeah, and I just like every time I start talking about it, I can envision everything I was told, and it's just.
And you wrote a book about this.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the book.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, the book comes about. Sorry, go ahead. Okay. Well, to begin with, is like I mentioned earlier. When I want to say 11 or 12, I was walking home from school, and I always tell everyone the first person I ever saw die was in a bus accident. And I was walking with my cousin on Highway 83 in Donna, and there was like a little convenience store. If you're standing at Donna High School and you look south, in that, like, you'll see a store. I think it's a candy place now, but it's just straight down there. And we were walking right by that store, and a bus passed us. And just as it passed, the emergency exit door opened, and a kid flew out and literally at our feet and cracked his head open.
Wow.
And all I can tell you, and I'll tell you what I remember, and then everything else that got filled into me. I remember like looking down. I can still see it in my head right now. And and my cousin had was not moved quicker than me. He grabbed me, and we turned and we ran to the convenience store. There's no 911 back then, and so telling the clerk, and the clerk's like, I don't know the number to the police department, because you had to call the police department like directly. There was no 911. My cousin yelled at him the number over and over, and that's all I remember. And I see later on when people are being questioned about maybe a sexual assault, and that happened years ago, and they're like, why can't you remember these things, and you only remember this? I'm like, I know exactly what they're talking about. I couldn't tell you the time of day. I couldn't tell you anything other than that happened, and I don't remember anything else. I had to ask my cousin to fill in the blanks for me. And he just told me, well, we were there, and the cops told us to go away. We're witnesses, really crazy, but they'll go home. And so we walked to my house, which is where we're going. And he told me that we just went into my room, and we prayed for him. And then my grandfather picked up my cousin.
That was it.
And I don't even remember that. In fact, I wrote that as the intro to my book, and my dad called me after he read my book and like, why didn't you ever tell me? And I'm like, Dad, I don't remember anything beyond that. But every time I hear a bus wreck, that image of that boy at my feet, it just pops right back in my head. So bus accidents always stayed in my head. So years later, I'm in high school. I want to say I was a freshman or sophomore. I was 89. And I remember I'm in my Spanish class, and back then, I don't know how schools still do it. I know we don't have that anymore, but they have like office runners, I guess, like kids that help out the office. And this kid came to bring something to my teacher, and she's the one who told us, hey, there was a bus accident in Alton, and some kids died, and that's all I really had heard, but that's the first thing that popped in my head. And so that story, stayed with me. About a week later, I was in the band, because that happened Thursday. And so Friday, Friday night football, they cancel it, of course, and they have a huge memorial at Tom Landry Stadium. And one, the interesting side story is that they said they released 21 balloons, and that those balloons gathered together by themselves in the middle of the field and went up together.
Wow.
And everyone took it as a sign that they were together.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah. And so the next week, we play Mission. And that was another reason it sticks in my head is that was a very different experience. I have no idea how to fully explain the atmosphere, but you could feel like anger. You could feel just like it almost was like heat all around this, it is probably, I just say anger. That's all I can really describe it as. And everyone was on edge. Fights kept breaking out in the field and in the stands. And it got to the point where our band director, usually we play halftime, of course, then we usually get like a third quarter to eat, and then fourth quarter, we finish out. And I was in the loading crew, so we always left early to get all the instrument boxes ready and all that. And so we played halftime, and we're coming off, and our band director's like, loading crews start getting everything ready. We're getting out of here. So we do that, and there's a delay because I think I heard later that they were trying to figure out a route out. Now, but I asked my kids today, because I'm a teacher, and they say it's not that bad. But honestly, back then, we were in the habit of our uniform bags to put them in the windows of the buses because kids would throw rocks at the buses.
Oh, jeez.
Like that was just a common thing. But as we're doing loading it up, and they're like, not only did they remind us to do that, even though they didn't have to, they're like, if you have small instruments, put them in the window as well.
Wow.
Because they were that scared. And sure enough, we tried. I know they said they were taking a back way to get out, but someone shot a pellet gun, and it shattered the window and got into one of our dancers' eyes. I remember seeing the ambulance waiting for us at the high school when we got there. So another reason that stayed in my head. So years later, me and my brother used to do little short independent films or looking at ideas, and I was like, no one ever did anything about the Alton Bus Crash. Now, mind you, once again, showing my age, no social media, none of that around. We had a real difficult time, like trying to, nowadays you can put on Facebook, hey, did anyone remember this? Yeah. And you get messages back. We interviewed the judge who presided over the case. We interviewed a court reporter and another judge, but that's the only people we got to talk to. And so we did a lot of research, but we didn't have enough to work with, so we just kind of left it alone. And I actually ended up using it for my bachelor's thesis. I was like, well, I might as well do something with it. And then years later, now with all the, the social media and stuff, we were able to reach out and do some interviews and stuff. And that's how how it all finally got done.
Who have you talked to that was directly impacted or part of that event?
Well, Alex De Leon. Now my name's I'm horrible with names. I think it's Cuellar I think he's now in Customs or Border Patrol. He was also a survivor. Talked to a witness who saw the accident. Talked to a couple of reporters to get their firsthand perspective, as they got there pretty quickly. We talked to the spokesman for Coca-Cola at the time, who strangely turned out to be my dad's cousin. Talked to a nursing supervisor where I used to work, who was around at that time. Let's see, who else did we talk to?
Have you spoken to any of the families that have lost loved ones?
Oh, yes. Reached out to a couple. Couple did want to talk. One just told me, I'll call you back, never got back to me. Talked to another lady who lost her sister, who told me, a tragic story, but she did not want to go, like, can I record you? Can we do a formal interview? And so I just, I had her on the phone. So I was like, well, is there anything you really want to, I'll put it in the book, like anything you really want to. And so she told me that, that little girl had just learned to sew. She had just finished, practicing showing off for their mom that she sewed some pants, and she was getting ready for quinceañera, and her mom had made her a quinceañera dress, and sadly she, that's the dress she was buried in. And another side story she told me is that the lady I was talking to, was pregnant at the time, and they were all super excited to see the baby. And of course, she didn't get to see the baby, and she told me it was just so odd that when the baby, and as he got older, would always freak out at the sounds of sirens.
Interesting. Can you take us back to what life was like back then? This was farm people, right? This is what they did. That they farmed pretty much.
Well, I mean, they were some of may have been migrant farm workers, others labored there. The valley looks super different, and it's great that you were describing. The valley was super different than it is now.
We again, growing up in the Alton vicinity. We had Juniors, which is still there now, on the 5 Mile line in Conway, on the west side and of Conway. And then on the east side, there was literally a little barn. It was called the Burger Barn. And we'd ride our horses from La Homa Road all the way to Conway, which is on 107, and then turn south and go all the way to 5 Mile line. And when we needed groceries and stuff like that, obviously we had cars and stuff, but it was just, it was cooler. The parents were off working and doing stuff, and we'd call them or get the call and go do this and go do that, or if we were just going to go visit somebody else. So I wouldn't say that we were all farmers. There were people from all walks of life, but riding your horse to a store or to a friend's house was still very common. We still did all that. Again, no cell phones. I don't even think there were pagers back then yet. All we had were public phones, pay phones. The geography. I mean, if you're from the valleys, mezquites, palm trees, and nopales. Well, on these caliche pits, when you start excavating them down to get to the level where the value is, the caliche, above you leave the earth untouched. So you'll have trees and things of that nature around these pits, sometimes camouflaging the pit. Here, that wasn't the case. There were shrubs, just wild weeds growing around. If you found yourself driving west on 5 Mile line, on your right-hand side was the pit. And it continues to be there. They've since then turned it into a park and a public area. But I literally, the first house that Judy, my wife, and I ever built and moved into right after we got married was on the 7 Mile line and Bryan Road on Brazos Street. I still remember the address. It's 8601 Brazos. And so Judy worked in Weslaco at a doctor's office, and at the time I was still subdividing properties with my old man. So I literally daily drove past the memorial of where this happened. And so it's been that location, that spot, and that accident has been very prominent in my life, even though it had no impact on me. I didn't know anybody. I just heard all of the stories, much like you guys who are listening and collecting the information that we're giving you guys. A lot of us didn't know what happened or how people passed or what the actual numbers were and how it happened. Josh and I have decided to bring all of these details to you guys. We're hoping that with Juan and the people that he has visited with, and hopefully some of you all can help us
piece it together.
Yeah, piece it together and paint a clearer picture of what the history is on this event, and hopefully that'll bring us to what it has led to, all these years later.
What I found interesting is it was a lower income, right? And when they got their money, this is where the greed starts to come in. Can you touch on that part?
Yeah. One thing, there's a couple that is its own little hornet's nest. But one thing you can start by talking about is, these people had never been exposed to that kind of money ever in their lives. And also, a lot of people don't know how lawsuits work. Like, I don't know how lawsuits work because there's talk about there's a language barrier, which there was. Sometimes they gave them contracts in English and they had no idea. But I would hazard a guess, even if they read English, I don't know what a standard lawsuit contract was. And, lawyers charged higher fees, higher percentages. Some of them did. But going back to the amount of money, they had never dealt with money like that. So, stuff that they don't think about, kind of like lottery winners, is I can buy a big house, which you can, but you don't understand taxes on the house. Now you're going to be paying so much taxes every year, and you're only getting a one-time check. So, a lot of people bought houses that they could later not keep. And you also had, kids, blowing money, and it becomes its own. There's a sad story about two kids who died in a sports car that they got the money from, because one of their siblings had died. In fact, when I was a paramedic, I worked with a medic who actually attended that accident, and he could tell me, like, to this day, I can't remember the name of the George Strait song, but it was still playing and the radio was still going when they got there. And he says, every time I hear that song, I think about those poor kids.
What happens is, and I really want to elaborate on this because it happens to us and to people from humble beginnings, and who, again, just don't have the comprehension of what having that kind of money can lead to.
And you're talking about millions of dollars, right?
I think the highest paid was like 11, and then the survivors got anywhere from 300 to 500,000. Like if you were a child on that bus who survived, you got like 300 to 500,000.
And if you were, so then the highest paid family got a total of 11 million.
And there was even lawsuits amongst the families because some got more than others, and like, how come he got more? And there's the legal end of this thing it's sad. I always talk about it being a compounded tragedy, because you have the tragedy, then you have the tragedy of the legal infighting, but then you also have, and there was one thing that when I interviewed a couple of survivors, they didn't really want to touch on it, but what happened in Alton at that time and the infighting within the community itself. Yes, at first there's this big, everyone bringing, donations and helping, but then as money starts rolling in, jealousies start happening, even within the mayor's office, and it just, that you introduce money and it's just like all kinds of things happen, and some people make good, some people, we one of them became a lawyer. People used it for their education to do different things, but you also have that tragedy of a lot of people going through that money and losing their homes and stuff like that.
It's because when you have access to that amount of money, any amount of money really, and you are suffering from either PTSD or the loss of a child. If you lose your spouse, if you lose your husband, you're a widow. Mm-hmm. If you lose your wife, you're a widower. A widower. There's no word for when you lose a child. It's that ugly of a situation. Mm-hmm. It's that difficult of a situation that we can't even put a word on it. So you take that pain, and then to pacify it, you give them money. Money without education, money without treatment, and I'm talking about mental treatment. The way we award settlements nowadays is, I believe it to be all wrong, man. I mean, I get the money part about it. I get how that soothes you, but it also gives you the ability to click and buy anything, and to get that dopamine, that feeling, that satisfaction that I'm able to afford something. And it distracts you from the pain just long enough until you have to go click again and buy something else. And then before you know it, again, your taxes are eating you up. There's fees, there's losses, and we don't know how to manage that money. Especially people from Alton who were back then, who were from really, really humble beginning, hardworking people, were just given this, Band-Aid money and told to drop it. The way settlements, I think, should be handled is, here's your settlement, here's your money, here's your $11 million, and you need to start taking all of these therapy classes or go to visit with a counselor, and over the years, as you heal, we'll be funding as you get better, because why are you going to give $11 million to a person who is in that much pain, and the only way they can soothe it or distract themselves from it is by spending and being excited over the money that they have? So yeah, I'm interested to really get into that and kind of see what those effects were, and maybe kind of educate people on what demands they make when they're trying to get settlement money. Instead of saying, give me 10 million, we need to be saying, I want a lifetime supply of counseling, and along with my money, and yeah, you can take it from those proceeds until I'm well, or we can fight for you to pay it, and I still get my proceeds, but I can't have access to them under duress, under mental stress, and under the loss of a child. I have to graduate, and I have to heal my mind, my spirit, my soul, and as I'm doing this, you guys can fund me and fund the therapy, because giving somebody a bucket of gold while they're in that much pain is just counterproductive.
Bandit.
No.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I do want to point out is, though I am more than certain that the families weren't involved in those numbers.
Well, that's disgusting. Man.
I'm pretty sure
They had to have had representation.
Yeah, yes, they had representation. I don't think the lawyers are like, how much money do you want?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they were just negotiating directly
On their behalf.
Yeah, on their behalf. So I don't think they had like an input as a number or whatever. I think that the lawyers themselves are looking at a payday,
Yeah.
and so they're looking at a number that they like, because they're going to get. I mean, it should be 30, but in some places in this case, 40 to almost 50 they were taking.
Wow.
And so, like, I think they were negotiating a number, not like with the family there. I think they were negotiating a number that they were gonna, what they were gonna get.
They were landing their pockets.
Yeah, they basically. I remember reading this article, like how about I forgot what they call them, but people that help lawyers like get cases. It's ambulance chasing. This guy was a former EMT, and he managed to get and they give you percentages of how many clients you brought in, and this guy made so much money, like a Picasso in his living room and stuff like that. And he was just a runner. That's what they're called, runners. And
So he had a Picasso and he was just a runner.
yeah, he was just a runner.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is insane. Yeah, I think that the aspect of like the always the greedy lawyers that they come in and they take advantage of the people because they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
I think that's just it's
but
a very disgusting thing.
I will add that I met two, honestly, and they were like very emotional about it. So I mean, I'm not going to say all of them were like that.
Do you think that over the years they started playing it back in their head, and then from that,
I'm not sure. All I know is that both of them told me the same thing, that it haunted their lives forever.
Representing the children who died, or taking money that they didn't
representing
deserve?
them.
No, that's bullshit. I call bullshit on whoever
Okay,
told you that, because if I'm an attorney and I represent you well, and I don't price gouge, and I don't do anything that is immoral to the situation, then I don't have guilt. I did, and I got you what we could get you. If there is an attorney out there who represented these children who feels guilty, they feel
I'm not sure if it was guilt. I think it was the situation they were in.
impacted them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
That's the way it was presented to me by both of them on separate occasions. There's two different lawyers. They told me that it had always haunted them, to deal with that case. I'm not sure, like you said, if it was over years now it haunts them.
Yeah,
but they said, they both said the same thing, that over time that they had never left their minds, that it had always haunted them.
How many lawyers had their hands in this
I
case?
don't know the exact number, to be honest with you. I really don't know the exact number, because you could also say like how many lawyers started and then how many lawyers ended, because some were taking clients from each other.
Wow.
In fact, one of the craziest stories I heard had involved LULAC, which is the Latino civil rights organization. The accident happens, and the local president, Jose de Lara, hears about it, and he hears that some people are being taken advantage of, and so he sends his lawyer, LULAC's lawyer, it's his lawyer and LULAC's lawyer, down with a group to go and make sure they're not being taken advantage of. And then somehow the guy acquires some of the clients from some other lawyers. So that becomes a lawsuit between them. And what's really crazy as I'm researching this is they start going through like records and stuff because of the lawsuits, that they find out there's, I think, $30,000 of missing money from LULAC, and they have to dissolve LULAC and recreate it after that. And it's all
it's Gage said it in our last in our documentary, man. It's profit over people.
Yeah.
And it's bullshit, and the attorneys who participate in it and who indulge and bask in it, I'm disgusted with them, man. They should be behind bars.
And you had firsthand
I was going to say
with that, because how many lawyers were?
I never asked you. Like, did you get approached by a lot of?
No, I was sucked into the vortex from the beginning, man.
He got you, and
he got us. He knocked on because when we got put into those rooms at the police department, they closed the shutters. They didn't want letting anybody in or out. And hours after being questioning, we can hear somebody banging on the shutter doors. Finally, they open it, and lo and behold, it's my savior, it's my attorney, who I had never met before.
Yeah.
You know, who I had absolutely no idea who he was, other than he was Roland's wife's boss. So he freed me from where I felt I was imprisoned. I was grateful. I signed. Yeah, you represent me.
And you didn't get any other phone call? Something I never asked you.
Oh my goodness, yeah, we got phone calls day and night from attorneys and from friends who worked with attorneys. And Robert, I saw you on the news. Are you represented? Leave him. Come with us. Like, yeah, and it sucks because it really tarnishes the integrity that should come with being an attorney.
Yeah.
What do you feel at that time? Because I think I can correlate what they were feeling. Like, how did you feel like when people were reaching out to you, like, go with this attorney, go with this, no, go with my attorney?
Honestly, man, it's irrelevant to the bus because people were suffering from the loss of life and things of that personally when they were getting these calls. To me, I hadn't lost anybody, thank goodness, that night. I had seen and witnessed a lot of things. So for me to get the calls, I was very young. I still felt very detached from the tragedy. Mm-hmm. These people were calling me, giving me praises, saying, you're a hero, we want to represent you. It was more of a flattering thing for me. But then as soon as I told Frank Enriquez, he was like, you need to tell anybody who calls you from now on asking about this event that they need to call your attorney. You can't answer any questions because then I can sue you for breach of contract with me. And as soon as you told me that, that's exactly what I did. Yeah. So again, 21 years old, I thought I had financial knowledge. I didn't, but I thought that I knew what I was doing. These individuals at the Alton bus accident were given vast amount of money that it would have taken them generations and generations to acquire. Almost some of them come from that humble beginnings. Is like giving a child a loaded gun and hoping that they just learn how to use it with no guidance and that everything works out.
Wow.
Yeah, and going back to like how crazy it was, I remember hearing descriptions that like when they get to the hospital to the gurney and you'd reach your hand in the sheets, you'd pull out handfuls of lawyer cards. It was so bad that the bar association had to send down a crisis team because there were so many shouts of barratry, which is ambulance chasing. Several lawyers get indicted. None of them go to jail. The only one found who goes to jail is the secretary.
Yeah, that's bullshit, man.
Wow. That is crazy, man.
That makes me sick. I got a lot of friends who are attorneys, man. I hope none of you guys are like that. If I find out, we're going to have words because, God, that's so disgusting, man. These are children.
Yeah.
The mothers and fathers.
Yeah, and you can also
who
think
lost
about
their children dealing with these sons of bitches who are just like,
like I said,
pick me so that we can... Yeah, no, that's and to the attorneys, I don't know how many of them are alive, but those of you who charged 50% to some of these families plus your fees and your expenses, just shame on you, man. I know you sleep well because it's an expensive mattress, but wow, man, these families that they took advantage of es gente nuestra, you know, es gente de aquí.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe part of like those high percentages and them not noticing is, I mean, they're in shock. They're not thinking straight.
They didn't know any better.
And maybe they want the phone calls to stop the people. Make everything else stop.
I think there's a lot of intimidation there too, man. You're intimidated over the fact that you don't know how you're going to pay for the funeral. You don't know how you're going to go to work and continue to provide. You don't know because of all of the duress that you're under and the stress. Your life, what we live and breathe for, has been taken from you. As you were sending it off to go better itself and become something better than who you are. And it was snatched right from under you, and you're still expected to pay every bill, do your duties as a mother, father, or older brother, sibling, whatever, and go to work while mourning. So yeah, I can see how an attorney could come in here and say, here,
I'll
sign
take care of it
this,
for you.
and I'm going to give you this. I'm going to talk to your job, tell them that you're not going to be at work for a while, but don't worry, I'm going to pay your bills. Because I got a lot of that too. It's just disgusting, man. It really is. I get that they need somebody to reach out to them, because sometimes we just don't know who to call. But that's just shady of those people to do that.
And what one major impact that we feel today legally, like I told you the bus system, but let's talk legally on lawsuits, is and I write this in my book in December of that year. This happens in December the year before. The Amigo store collapsed. I don't know if you guys know that story. It was a 3-story building in Brownsville. It was a shop and it had a flat roof, and it rained real hard, and it pancaked down,
It's
killing a lot of
ringing
people.
so many bells in my head, but I can't.
And so there were a lot of
lawsuits.
lawsuits from that running through the courtroom, and then there were the lawsuits from Alton running through the courts, and and it was lawsuit. So then this big campaign happens, about lawsuit abuse, and so they start putting caps on, and they pass a law that cap lawsuits, and the end result of that is nowadays it is actually really difficult to I worked in healthcare for years. If you sue a doctor or something,
Capped at $250.
they're capped. So it almost becomes to a point where lawyers won't even take the case anymore because it's not worth it. And so there's people getting away with all kinds of stuff because it's not even worth taking the case anymore.
Wow.
Because these caps are put in because of the lawsuits. They use that as like an advertising. Oh, lawsuit abuse, that's not a lawsuit abuse. That was major loss of life. That's why you have so many cases. But they make it sound like it was just rampant. But like it was 2 episodes, and there was just a lot of people. But now, because of the caps that come out of that, malpractice suits are actually lower because it's hard to find a lawyer
that will actually take the case
because
on.
it's not really worth it
Because
monetarily.
if you get best case scenario, $250,000, less than 33%, your
And then
lawyer's
whatever
gonna
they
charge
spend
you,
to-
whatever their expenses are.
to
there's not
try the
enough money.
case.
Yeah.
And you're looking at medicine, so you have to
I've never
hire
looked at it that
expert
way.
witnesses. You have to hire people that are going to cost you money. And so,
So it's literally a loophole to protect the doctors.
Huh. Interesting. Wow. Well, with that being said, guys, we're going to continue this. We're going to continue diving into this. I think it's such an interesting story, man. I think with your help, we can get maybe some other people on that were directly affected with this, because we'd love to chat with them. And I know, how many years ago? 33?
it was 33 now because my book came out on the 30th anniversary.
Wow. So 33 years ago, one of the most tragic accidents happened in Alton, and laws have been passed because of that. So, get into the comments, guys. We really want to explode this just like we did with the Queen Isabella. I think this is a story that rings true to our culture right here in the Rio Grande Valley. And with Juan's help, we'd love to share the story.
I'm excited, Juan. Thank you for
I'm
sharing.
happy to do it.
Awesome. We'll see you guys. Take care.